Hey, good morning. Today we're going to talk about chapter 14. We're starting the absolute last unit now on, we're talking about adolescence. So I encourage you, I invite you to take a trip down memory lane and remember what it's like to begin adolescence and puberty. Um, there are, Most of what we've looked at in this class so far has been very age related. So we say the first unit was pre-birth, in utero. The second unit was the first 2 years of life. The third unit was the next 3 or 4 years, the preschool years. Then we have the school years. The school years, that unit ends with this word puberty, and adolescence begins with the word puberty. That is not necessarily one age for everybody. In fact, we're seeing now that most people are reaching puberty earlier than in past years. So that is one of the questions, the issue in this, in this unit, in this chapter that you're reading this week, chapter 14. Then the just as an intro to adolescence, think about, what does that mean? What does adolescence mean? I mean, I've talked to a lot of parents that go, "Oh my God, my child is reaching adolescence," as if it's some horrible thing. Many of you may have negative views of adolescence. You remember how horrible it was to be an adolescent. Adolescence is not necessarily a bad thing, it's a good thing. It is a time that we are transitioning to become adults. Now, sometimes our bodies hit adulthood before our minds, and our souls do. Ooh, sorry, so minds and emotions and all that does. But the truth is that this transitional period is really a gift. It's a wonderful time that we have to explore some issues that are probably adult issues, and yet we're not really considered adults, so we don't have to really bear those consequences as much. So it gives us a couple of years to practice having adult level thinking and adult decisions and all that, without, really having to have adult level consequences. Maybe some people do. Well, some people definitely have adult level consequences. So anyway, there's that. So let's look. Most of this 14th chapter has to do with the physical changes in adolescence. So you have all this stuff with puberty. I'll point out one thing in particular, that there's a difference between the parts of your body that change that have to do with sexual reproduction. Those are changes we call primary sexual characteristics. And those parts of the body that don't necessarily have anything to do with sexual reproduction, and we'll call those secondary sexual characteristics. The point of having those different is that the secondary stuff often leads to the primary stuff. But in girls, we'll find that usually a lot of those secondary things like breast development happens first. In boys, they tend to kind of lead with the primary ones: penis size, ejaculation, that kind of thing. Um, so we'll see those hormonal kind of changes. Hormones in girls kind of lead to the secondary sexual characteristics before the primary ones. And I am really generalizing, overgeneralizing. And the hormones lead to primary sexual characteristic development in boys first. So let's look at that as you line up. It seems like girls mature faster than boys, and that's okay, because the boys are going to catch up because they're leading with the primary ones. Stood at about the same age, within maybe 6 months, you'll see maybe and girls and boys able to actually sexually reproduce, which may not be what you want when somebody is 10, 11 years old. Anyway, there's the question. Well, we'll leave that for chapter 15. Why is it that we think that's such a horrible thing? Anyway, Something else that develops that sometimes doesn't get as much press is the brain. The adolescent brain is developing, and this is probably the reason why adolescents act the way they do. Of course, you know, the hormones get all the press. Oh my God, teenagers are so moody. Oh, they're always either anxious or depressed, or they do crazy, stupid things without thinking or whatever. Probably a lot of that is due to the development of the brain, because you have a part of your brain. Let's say the amygdala is an example, in that middle of the brain, the limbic system, the amygdala particularly, which is responsible for the strong emotions. So that's developing, or that's number one. You also have the frontal cortex of your brain, in which you use that to make rational decisions, think about things, do the right thing, that kind of thing. Particularly, the part of that is what we were talking about in the last chapter about moral decisions. Okay, what you have to have there is communication then between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So where you feel like, oh my God, I've got to punch that person because they looked at me or something, and then the prefrontal cortex is looking at you doesn't matter. That's silly. Don't get so upset. So you need this pathway so they can communicate. Well, that is what is under development in early adolescence, which is why teenagers are lousy at being able to make good emotional kinds of decisions. They're really bad at being able to read other people's emotions, which is why sometimes you see the teenager, oh, why are you yelling at me? Nobody's yelling. Everybody's happy. You're so upset. They can't read your emotions because that part of the brain is under construction. See? So there's that. Okay. This is also a period of time that we might be concerned, because of these things, about the decisions that adolescents are making. When you're 6 years old and you make a decision, it might mean whether you take cookies out of the cookie jar. When you're 13, you make a decision. It might be whether to take a picture of yourself nude and post it on the internet. Okay, so you see, we see maybe in adolescence those kinds of decisions weighing more. Um, this is why we would be concerned about risk taking, sexual behavior, drinking, drug taking, sleep patterns, and all of these kinds of things. I will tell you that for the most part, adolescents can make great decisions. Most do, most of the time. It's when we don't that gets bad press. But most of us get through adolescence just fine. And I'll just leave you with that. Because there's not that much more in the chapter, but just pay attention to those kinds of physical issues of development, and then try to think practically, how do they apply? And you can use your own history to do so. So I hope you enjoy this chapter and this unit on adolescence, and I'll see you next time for chapter 15.